I think we have had another rich exchange provided by all our panelists, and I want to thank all of them for this. Really appreciated it. I have learned so much today, and I believe many of you have. And as you have been contemplating some of the information provided, I think one or two of you may have a question or so or a comment that you would like to pose. We are, in fact, running behind time, but I think I'd like to afford the opportunity to two questions. If at all possible, we'll take them together and then have the responses, and I would just encourage you to make them brief. I see the Ambassador of Kenya. Excellency, you have the floor, and I see Mr. Mooney, so we will take those two questions. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wonderful presentations. Allow me just to make two comments and ask one question. With regard to the presentation by Diondo, he did mention that titles as collaterals exist basically in Southern Africa. I want him to know that they are in other parts of Africa. For example, between 2013, Madam Chair, and 2017, Kenya processed over 3.3 million title deeds. I wanted that to be known. Secondly, I like the presentation by Sanda, where he talked about 50% stroke 50% profit sharing, which is brilliant. As ACP countries, we've been talking about exporting processed goods from our countries. So this concept of earned value at source, brilliant. He is a friend of ACP, if I can say that. Finally, Madam Chair, if you ask, I want to ask just a small question to Annette, my friend. She talked about challenges with regard to this product of theirs, Ibiza. And the only challenge that she mentioned is legal. I want to imagine more above legal challenges, there must be something else with regard to this product. It's one thing to sell a product in a very nice way, the way Annette did, but let her tell us about these other challenges. Thank you. I submit.
Thank you, Excellency. I now give the floor to Mr. Mooney. You have the floor.
Well, thank you. I very much enjoyed the presentations, and I'll just ask Annette a quick question, which is there a concern that there could be a bias in the insurance that because of the stresses that you're focusing on would affect different crops in different ways? So is there a bias towards then insuring only certain crops in certain places and excluding others? And within those crops, would there be a bias towards certain genetic diversity than others? So that farmers might find themselves being encouraged to grow specific crops or even taking on input packages that would reduce their insurance costs.
Annette, the focus is on you. Two questions. Thank you. Okay, we'll take one other quick question and then we'll do the answers. So could you hold for me, Annette? Alice, you have the floor.
It's actually not a question, but it's a comment and a response to the inquiry you said about the legal challenges you have in this jurisdiction. There's a slide that I missed in my presentation about, I told you we don't have specific laws in blockchain in most East African countries or African countries, but many also African countries now have implemented or enforced the data protection and privacy law. And that law definitely actually has an impact on all the nature of doing business in blockchain, because it's all about collecting data. The data subjects, do you get consent from them in case you're in breach? What are the sanctions? We copied a lot in our country, in Uganda. We benchmarked a lot with the GDPR. So some of the regulations, since you're based actually in Europe, you'll be compliant, I think, automatically if you came to East Africa, because I know many of the regulations are quite similar. But in terms of being on the right side of the law, on the wrong side of the law, some of the existing laws, you could be able to actually know where you fall. Yeah.
Thank you for helping Alice out. Alice, I turn to you, and sorry, Annette, and I turn to you, and then we will close off the panel. You have the floor.
Okay. Mr. Khomeini, let me start with your question. You asked me, are there any other challenges than the legal, regulatory, supervisory challenges? Yes, of course there are. We have to build a parametric model, and we have to acquire data, weather risk data from all those specific countries that we are going to work in. So we need historic data. Satellite data is usually not older than 5 to 10 years. In traditional insurance, you usually go back 40 years to be sure that you have a proper validated model. So we are creating some guesstimates. Having said that, answering to Pat Mooney and your question at the same time, we are completely agnostic to what type of crops there are in the soil. So we don't care what crops there are growing, and we can do that because we don't insure typical parts of the land and specific crops, because we want to allow people to come with intercropping. All the small farmers need to be part of our solution. So whatever there is on the soil, we are happy to protect it. And we only look at the situation of this year compared to the last year and the year before that, based on the NDVI, the vegetation, normalized digital vegetation index, or the NWI, the normal digital water index. So is there more or less water than last year? Is there more or less vegetation in the fields than last year? And if we conclude that there is less, then there is a loss and people will receive their money. So it doesn't matter what the type of crop is, as long as they tell us what the amount of money is that they will pay us compared to the amount of money that they want to have protected. And then the premium will be somewhere between 2 and 5%, not more, never more. 5% being already on the high, taking into account that there may be somewhat more risks than in other parts of the world.